What is the new world order in front of us? Is G2 a strategic test for India? Why will India find it extremely difficult to fit in, and what India should do? The re-emergence of the term Group of Two or G2 is sending shockwaves across the global geopolitics, where US, which was calling China its enemy, is now calling it an equal partner. But the real question for us here is, where does all of this leave India? Hello everyone, welcome to Vajiram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh, and today we are going to understand all the dimensions related to Group of Two. How come this idea has emerged? Is it of this time or it has been used previously as well? What does it mean? What does it have to give to the globe? And most importantly, where does India stand in this situation? So let us start with understanding that what exactly is this G2 concept. When we are talking about G2, that is Group of Two, this is not a new term. It has been previously coined by an economist by the name C. Fred Bergeston, and that was given in the era of President Bush. And this whole concept of Group of Two, it proposed a simple thing that US and China should come together as partners and manage the global issues, be it of trade, be it of climate, or be it of finance. There was another similar term which was Chimerica, and it was given by a historian, Niall Ferguson, where he understood that China's manufacturing force needed to be combined with US's finance backing, and it could really have a great impact at the global level altogether. However, these both ideas gradually faded once this partnership was never seen, and there was a certain assertiveness coming from China, and US went on to its own way, especially after the time of President Obama, because China became really assertive, expansionist in nature, and US decided that because this partnership is not working out, they need an alternative, and that is where India also emerged as a counterweight for China for US in this situation. Now that we have understood G2, let us also get back into understanding the timeline of relationship that we have seen between US and China, because you will be able to draw a parallel line which will show you that how US and India's relationship has been and also how it has been with China and India. For example, if you talk about the initial period when we are mentioning 1972 to 2000, where there was economic engagement between the two countries, you will find there were extreme hostilities which existed between US as well as India. And there was a limited timeline where India and China also shared any kind of partnership. But here comes the next phase from 2010 to 16, where US gradually pivots towards Asia. South China Sea disputes rises, and that is where there is strategic suspicion towards China, and that's where we see gradual parting of ways. And then comes the era where there is extreme hostility, two countries on very different sides, and you will find at this very time that India got an opening to rise as a regional power, as an alternative to China. And all of a sudden in 2025, after the recent meeting of Donald Trump and Xi Jinping in Busan, led not only to a surprise where they straight away went ahead calling us each other mutual friends, mutual partners, but also there was re-emergence of the term G20. So when we are talking about this timeline, you will understand that how India gets to operate, and the space and the scope it has is very much dependent on it and varies along with it. So that is why I have established the timeline here. Now let us move ahead and understand that why all of a sudden US decided to change its tune. Yes, it has been pretty much common, especially during the term of President Donald Trump, that here and there it means all the same thing. One day they are on side of India, one day they are on side of Pakistan, the other day they will claim that they have got the ceasefire and then moving on to something else. But in this situation, one thing that started when his term began was his hostility towards China. And as soon as things started to not work in their favor, all of a sudden China threat, the idea of China threat rapidly changed into partner for peace. And this has many reasons that how all of a sudden this tune has changed. The first major reason that we get to see is the very simple fact that there have been multiple economic setbacks in US, where Donald Trump started his campaign about making America great again. He never spoke about economic setbacks, he talked about economic gains. But as soon as these economic setbacks came in, especially because of the tariff wars, he understood that China is coming from a position of strength, they have more leverage and they need to be brought to the same side. Second thing, the US importantly wants economic stability. Herein I am referring to President Donald Trump because the elections are coming in the very next year. So these economic setbacks are a problem and economic stability is very much required. Furthermore, amidst this tariff war that was going on, the chaotic thing that was taking place, Beijing made sure that they remained resilient in terms of tech and also manufacturing. So there was no as such loss that was seen. There was no huge effect of this tariff threat, tariff war from US's end. And again, that helped to bring US to the table and adjust. And that is why the narrative that China is a threat has all of a sudden been changed, and it is talking about that peace will be brought through strength, strong partners and mutual respect. So basically, Donald Trump has gone ahead and framed everlasting peace, and it is showing not affection. Don't you think that this is coming out of affection? It is coming out of necessity. It is a simple strategic bargain. It is not a friendship, just like it was with India, where India was called a very important special friend, but 50% tariff without any time, without any thought. So this is a strategic requirement which US in this scenario is trying to fulfill. Now that we have established this as well, let us move and understand that what most importantly it will have in form of impact across the world. The first thing that we will get to see, that will be there will be two centers of power, which China and US. So these two will be deciding the whole global narrative. As the concept itself talked about, they will be the ones making the major decision on trade, climate and finance. They will be able to make important decisions because the power is concentrated. When I am saying power, I directly mean economic power. Second, the biggest loss would be coming to the emerging economies here, the middle powers who were making use of the space or the void that was created because of the rift between US and China, and that would be Japan, European Union, Russia and also our own country, India. That means these countries might be sidelined if the concentration of power happens of these two countries in one very same place. And as a global impact, when we are seeing just one country, US is throwing tantrums, and because of that, multilateral firms, be it WHO, be it G20, be it UN, they are weakening. Just imagine two countries coming together and such economic powers. So these multilateral forums will weaken. And when we are talking about a world of multipolarity, the concentration of these two powers will shift to a world of bipolarity. And amidst all this, all the smaller nations, they will face a policy squeeze because it would be just between Washington and Beijing. You can get to see that G20 idea is reviving Cold War era like dynamics. But the only difference here is that it was about ideology and missiles back then. As of now, it is about trade as well as tech. So the place that ideology and the missiles had in the Cold War era, that has been replaced by trade and tech as of now, and they are being used to come to the center or go away from the center. Now let us understand and come to the actual point. What is India's position? Is India actually being left out, or it is about playing smart? There is no second guessing. Yes, if this actually happens for US and China, if this is not just strategic signaling, but two of them coming together for a long-term situation, it will turn out to be a situation of a very important strategic testing time. But at the same time, we can't ignore the fact that India has just signed a 10-year defense framework with the US, and US is still siding with China. And it definitely has certain risk involved, where we are fearing marginalization, where we are fearing that US might be reluctant to counter China aggressively, which was seen in previous scenarios, and less room for India, especially when we are talking about global trade or tech norms, to rise as a regional leader, global leader, because the space will be taken up by both of these very countries. But at the same time, there are certain leverages that exist at our end which can be used. For example, we can use the defense ties that we have just got in the framework with the US to strengthen and bring real cooperation with the US. Because whatever with China that has been talked, that is apparently short term as of now. Second, it can already strengthen the voice as a neutral and stabilizing power, and India has always pitched like that we are here for our own strategic autonomy. We are not going to take any sides, and please do not forget that India is one of the founding nations of non-aligned movement. Can you tell me in the comment section who were the founders of NAM? Now this is where we have to gradually manage in the coming time. But the question is, if this is what India's position looks like, then what are our options? So when we talk about options, we have to understand that different dimensions will require different approach. For example, if we are talking about diplomacy, it would be very important for us to have some clarity from the US, especially about Indo-Pacific commitments, because the US-China rift, apart from economic parameters, another huge issue has been Indo-Pacific region, where China has been always trying to bring in expansionist policy, be it the 9-dash line, be it the string pearl policy and whatnot. And this is also the time that India would need to strengthen the Quad framework and European Union partnership, so that there is appropriate amount of balance on one side. Imagine a seesaw where two giants such as US and China are sitting, and on one side we have India. So if India wants to balance this scenario, we would need heavyweights on our side as well. And most importantly, which is also very important in diplomacy, maintain open channels with China so as to ensure there is no escalation and we remain a balancing neutral force in this scenario. But when we are talking about economic dimension, we have to understand that this is the time we have to become self-reliant. This is the time where Make in India needs to soar, and we also need to make sure that we are friend-shoring. What do we mean by friend-shoring? That we are able to bring supply chain and attach supply chain with like-minded countries, bring in tech standards, better supply chain resilience, reduced infrastructure cost, and make sure that we are independent of both superpowers in this situation. Then we are talking about defense and tech. In this situation, we have to operationalize the 10-year pact through joint exercises so that the strength that exists as Indo-US cooperation that maintains. Furthermore, it is important to build strong maritime partnerships to ensure that there is freedom and there is foray, especially in the Indian Ocean and Asian region, because again, they will help as a counterweight if US and China sit together on the seesaw on the one particular side itself. Now, on this note, I would be concluding with the thought that yes, The road ahead looks difficult, but this is the time that we have to understand that what US and China are doing is most likely temporary, because it is driven by economic need as of now. It might change with presidents, it might change with policy, but India has to make sure that it uses its strategic geography, economic scale to stay indispensable across the globe, to stay relevant, promote multipolarity, because that's what we have stood for, and also lead on inclusive global governance, be it on climate, digital finance, where we can come high on South-South cooperation. Now that was all from my side. Thank you so much.